Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is our March 2022 general meeting of the Naperville Astronomical Association. A couple of quick upcoming events. I think all of our events in February were canceled either due to clouds or like a foot of snow the night before. So hopefully in March we get a few observing events. March 5th is a members only night, so that's this weekend at 7:30. March 12th is a public night at our observatory at 7:30 p.m. March 15th is our astronomy fundamentals meeting. That'll be on the RSC handbook by Steve Sagarian will be presenting that. And I forgot to change the word February to March, but on March 26th is a public night at our observatory at 8 p.m. So tonight, as you're watching this video, if you have any questions, if you're watching on Facebook, you can just comment on the video, and Chris will get those comments or those questions fed to our speaker. Or you can email questions@naperastro.org, and Chris will keep an eye on that mail as well. So tonight our speaker is Bragg. I know tonight is the State of the Union address, but Greg's going to be talking to us about the state of the astronomy industry. Greg started selling telescopes in a camera store back in the early 80s and started working for a manufacturer in the astronomy industry in 2005. And for the last couple of years, he's been a specialty account sales manager at Celestron. So Greg, if you're there, I will let you share your screen.
I'm here, Jim. Thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate it. And give you a little update on what's going on in our hobby and give you some information about some history about the hobby and a little bit about what the retailers go through and how they bring the product from us to you, that kind of stuff. As Jim mentioned, I started selling telescopes in the early 80s, and I worked at a camera store in Jacksonville, Florida called Wolf Camera. We put in telescopes, and Celestron national sales manager came to our store to train us. No one in the store really knew what telescopes were about, really. So we ended up having about an hour-long meeting with this guy, and he took me out in the parking lot of our mall under the street lights in the parking lot and put a little 90 millimeter Schmidt Cassegrain on a hood of his car and showed me Saturn, and the rest they say is history. So that was my introduction into this industry and this hobby. I've been pretty involved with the hobby in general myself. I've never done any astrophotography, despite the fact that I spent many years working at a camera store, about 30 years to be exact, in the photo industry. But in 2001, Wolf Camera went out of business. They were actually sold. And a friend of mine and I started a company selling photographic products throughout the Southeast. And during that period of time, I was trying to get Meade, because of my interest in the hobby, to let me represent their product in the Southeast. And finally, in 2005, they gave me that opportunity. So I worked for them for 2 years, covering Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, North Carolina, and that kind of stuff. And eventually got a job offer to come to work for them. And in 2007, went to work for them as the vice president of specialty sales based out of Atlanta. That's where I live now. And I was with them for 5 years until they kind of crashed and burned and were losing money in sales. I'll get into a little bit more about their history down the road here. But in 2012, about 35 of us were all laid off at the same time. And fortunately, wasn't too long after that, Explorer Scientific gave me a job opportunity, and I went to work for them for about 7 years, and then left them to go to work for Pentax. And that was very short-lived, just to be sport optics sales manager. And in November of 2019, I came to work for Celestron. I've been with them since then, and am responsible for the similar kind of responsibility I had with Meade and Explore Scientific, taking care of specialty account sales. That's the telescope retailers generally that most of you are familiar with. If you bought equipment in the last 20 plus years, you probably know some of these guys that I deal with. I take care of selling them product, help them market it, help them with knowledge base and, all the stuff that goes along with selling the product. So I've been doing that now since 2019 with Celestron and am having a really good time. Very, very good company to work for. And I'll go into more of that as we get through the presentation as well. So most of you probably have some concept of how big the industry is from the presentations I've done with this kind of idea in mind in the past. The numbers vary widely from probably $1 million to billions of dollars, and that's far from the truth. So here's the recent number that was estimated in 2018 to be about $180 million in the US. I'm sorry, in the global market in US dollars. So worldwide, the astronomy industry is pretty small. We call it a niche market or a cottage market. There's different names for it. But 180 million was the estimate for 2018. Many of you know, if you're trying to buy telescopes right now, that it's very challenging to find product available. That's because when COVID became a thing and the early part of 2020, people got to go home, didn't have to work in their office. They got extra time, they got stimulus money, and the industry exploded. I mean, unbelievable amount of growth in a very short period of time. And the experts in this estimate by 2025, we will be around 340 million because of what's happened since 2020. Celestron is 62 years old this year, and they had 18 straight months of historical sales records starting in April of 2020. And we've only missed about 4 months, maybe 5 months, very close to reaching a historical goal in one of those 4 or 5 months. But we are doing incredible amounts of volume, and we're not going to reach the 340 this year or even next year. But if the trend continues, it's certainly on track to get us to that 2025 estimate. Now, one of the things that's important to understand is all of the companies in this industry are privately held. At one time, Meade was a publicly traded company from 2004 to 2017. They were publicly traded, but that was the only company at the time that had the opportunity to publish what their sales were. And at that time, they were the biggest company in the industry, and now not so much. I'll get to that a little bit later as well. So what's included in this industry? Well, we sell outdoor products like hand warmers and red flashlights, and we also sell binoculars and microscopes. Those things are not included in the calculation of the sales of this industry. So only telescopes and astronomy-related accessories are included in that 180 million estimate in 2018. So what about microscopes and sport optics? It's a science-based product, just like telescopes are. So it is actually calculated independently, though. But most of the manufacturers in this industry do sell microscopes and sport optics, and this will be quite shocking to you. I don't think many of you know this unless you're involved in that industry. But microscopes account for $11.2 billion in 2020. That's with a B. And the sport optics, which is binoculars, rifle scopes, and spotting scopes, is about 484 million in 2020. So you can see we're quite small compared to the other industries we're involved in, although those directly in the astronomy industry are generally only involved in these three categories. Okay. So a little bit of history about the manufacturers. I'm going to tell you about the top three right now, and then we'll talk about some other ones in a few minutes. But Celestron is not the oldest manufacturer still in business, but one of the oldest for sure. In 1960, a guy named Tom Johnson was looking for a telescope for his son. He didn't like the low-end telescopes on the market, the little 60 millimeter refractors and 80 millimeter refractors and stuff like that. So Tom developed the actual Schmidt-Cassegrain. He developed that product, and that's really what helped him start Celestron back in 1960. Tom passed away in that's wrong, not 2102, but 2012. Tom, I never got a chance to meet him, but I have met several guys that knew and worked with him and said he was a class act and really was a pioneer in the industry. In 1980, they were sold. Most people that know about this aren't allowed to tell about it. So the information about who they sold to in 1980 is unknown, but in 97, Tasco bought them. And Tasco just about put them out of business. In 2002, Meade tried to buy them because their value was pretty low. And the courts stopped the sale because of a monopoly. So they were the actual company was given back to the original owners, which was Tom Johnson again. There was two other owners apparently during that time as well. One of them still works for Celestron and is responsible for international sales for the company. And then in 2005, a Chinese company called Cinta purchased them. And I've met David, the founder of Cinta, a really nice gentleman, very good to work for. And the company celebrated its 60th year in 2020. Meade is also one of the older companies in the industry still alive. They started in 1972, and John Diebel was the founder. And I did have the opportunity to meet him. He worked for Hughes Aircraft, and almost a similar story as Tom Johnson's. He wanted to get some telescope for his kid, and he went searching for product and didn't find anything that he thought was of the right value for the money you were spending. So he started buying one-off telescopes from Chinese manufacturers and other manufacturers around the world until he found something he really liked. And then once he found what he liked, he started selling that under the Meade brand. And that's what started his company. In 1986, John sold to a equity firm company, basically called the Harbor Group. And in 1991, they were doing so poorly that John was able to buy it back along with three other guys for $510. I think most people would be shocked at that. He assumed $2 million in debt. And then in 1991, he began production of LX90s, LX200s, ETXs, and a couple of other very popular Meade products in Irvine, California. When I started with them in 2005, as an independent rep, they were still producing product in Irvine, and I was able to go see the factory and see the things that they were doing. They were very innovative and did a lot of great things during the time period when they had manufacturing in Irvine, and that facility stayed there until 2008, I believe. They moved their factory 2009. They moved their factory to Mexico. But you can see some things that they did during the years between 91 and 2013 that showed some promise, but yet also showed some weaknesses. In 2006, they had a major lawsuit over a product they developed called the Advanced Coma Free, and they said in their marketing that it was like having Hubble in your backyard. And that raised some feathers, and a lawsuit was filed. They actually won the lawsuit, but because of legal fees and the time that lawsuit took place, they spent about $2 million to keep that lawsuit from causing their business to basically die. In 2006, they bought Simmons Outdoor, which was a rifle scope company and a binocular company. In 2006, they also had a class action lawsuit and paid out $2.9 million in a settlement. By the way, all this information is public, and if you want to see it, it's all out there. I'm not telling you anything proprietary. This is information that most people can dig up on the internet. It's not something that's secret, in other words. So in 2009, they moved to Tijuana, Mexico, their factory down there. In 2013, I left in 2012, and in 2013 they went back to private, and they were merged with a company out of China called Sunny Electronics, Ningbo Sunny Electronics. And then in 2019, they were found guilty of suppressed competition and fixed prices. I could give you my opinion about that, but it would probably get me into trouble. So I'm going to hold that to myself. But Orion was awarded $16.8 million in damages. And in 2019, during that lawsuit, Meade filed for bankruptcy. So that's the basic history of Meade up to 2019. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a few minutes. In 2008, Explore Scientific was founded. That was started by a guy named Scott Roberts, who was a Meade executive level guy. He was a executive VP of sales and marketing over a period of about 20 years. And he left Meade before I actually was laid off and started Explore Scientific. If you know Scott, you know he's a class act. If you've had a chance to meet him at a star party or at an event, he's a really, really, really great guy. One of my best friends, actually. And in 2010, he actually sold the majority of his company to a Chinese company called Jinghua Optical. JOC is what it's called. And he has 4 partners, and they sell 10 brands. So it's a really, really successful company in a pretty short period of time compared to the others. Now, in 2021, the courts awarded Orion the Meade branding and transferred all of their operating assets, cash, accounts receivable, inventory, intellectual properties, that kind of stuff. And now Meade is owned by Orion. They changed the name a little bit. It's not called Meade Instruments anymore. I don't remember what it's called, but it still uses the Meade brand and still uses the Meade logo. But in 2021, just not long ago, that company became owned by Orion. Okay. So here's a list of some of the major manufacturers that are still in business. Takahashi and Questar are older than Celestron, and Takahashi is a Japanese company, and they started making optical instruments in 1946. Telescopes to be exact, and they're some of the most prized telescopes in the world. Most people that want to buy one have to wait a year or more to get that type of telescope. And Questar, which is made in the United States, still being produced today. They make, if you're familiar with the Meade ETX 90 and 125, they make a telescope similar to what Meade made or still makes. But way higher end, much better glass quality, much better mechanics, much better electronics. And they've been around since 1950, and they're still in business today. I just saw an ad a couple of days ago in my inbox from Questar through some dealer. Their little 127 millimeter Mac Cassegrain is selling for about $9,000 now. So they're very proud of their work, and they have beautiful quality stuff. So I'm not going to go through all of these. Unfortunately, time prevents that. But there are a couple of things that you should glance through and look at. This will tell you the people that are responsible for it. You'll see a couple of things there about people that have become owned by someone else, changed ownerships, that kind of stuff. Lost Mandy, for example, at one time was making mounts for Celestron, and now Lost Mandy makes their mounts with their brand on them. You see Coronado solar scopes. Coronado was founded by a guy named David Lunt in Tucson, and was sold to Meade in 2004. And Meade is still the owner of Coronado Scopes. So they transferred with the Orion acquisition. You'll also see that Skywatcher is owned by the same guy that owns Cinta, which also owns Celestron. And then you'll see that Andy Lunt, under Lunt Solar Systems, the son of David Lunt, started his own solar system company in 2007 called Lunt Solar Systems. So there's a lot of things that revolve around, people knowing other people and that kind of stuff in our industry, which is good for our industry and has been beneficial to the manufacturers over time and has cultivated, a lot of things for our hobby, which is pretty important for the success of our business and our industry. Chris, you got any questions there?
Not at this time, Greg.
Okay, thanks. So there's a lot more manufacturers, obviously, that aren't as prominent as the ones that I've told you about. I'm going to show you that information now. This is the majority of the brands in the industry. This is not a complete list. There are probably another 30 or 40 brands that are, somehow associated with the astronomy industry. The ones that are in yellow are what many of us believe to be the top 10. And Celestron is the number one manufacturer in the industry right now. I've been in it since the 80s, and there's been quite a roller coaster up and down between the manufacturers and stuff like that. But the ones that I've highlighted in yellow are most likely in the top 10. There's again no real information out there except for what people kind of glean from the dealer base and how much they're selling and how much we see flowing through the inventory world and stuff like that. So these are what I believe are the top 10. This is my list. This is not a list that came from anybody else. I know Celestron is number one, but I don't know the ranking of these other guys that are in yellow. I do believe these are the bigger volume companies in the industry, but I do think that is subject to change and subject to opinion as well. So there's a lot of them there. I mean, a lot you may not have even heard of if you're new to this hobby. There's probably only a handful of them that if you've been around the hobby for many years, 15 or 20 years, you'll recognize some of them, but you probably won't know all of them, even to the best of your ability to go find out who they are and what they do. You may not even run across them in even some of the better telescope retailers out there as well. So,
Greg, I do have a few questions that just floated in.
Sure.
Of course, happens always after you ask.
Of course.
So one of the questions posed by Eric Clays: how can there be so many manufacturers when their market is so small?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was from Eric, I think. The world of the hobby is anybody. Well, I can tell you a couple of quick little stories. There's a company out there that makes dovetail plates, and they make some really good ones. They also make cradle rings and do some knobs and machining and stuff like that. It's a really small company, but they do provide a service, and they probably don't do, a few $100,000, if that, a year in sales. So because the vast majority of these that are on this list that you're looking at right now, many of them, probably are part-time businesses in some cases. Even some of them are guys that make only knobs. Revolution Imager, for example, is a company that is only they only offer two little cameras for primarily for guide scope use or for real inexpensive astrophotography, low end type stuff, and chances are they probably do a very small amount of business per year. The big 10 that you see there probably in some cases do less than $5 million a year, even to be part of the top 10. So that's part of the answer to the question Eric just asked about how could there be so many in this small industry when there's so little volume? Because a lot of these guys do very little volume. What else you got, Chris?
Yeah, so you just answered Eric's other question, but another one just popped in by Bill Perdue. I'd have thought Orion would be in the top 10, but they aren't. Is that because they're more retailer than manufacturer?
Yeah, in reality, until they became the owners of Meade, they were not a manufacturer. Orion is an excellent retailer, has been for a long, long time. They've been in business for quite a few years. In fact, I can go back to the last slide and tell you when they were. Well, I guess I can't. There we go. So Orion got in business in 1975, and their primary objective was to become a distributor of product, and they had a product development team, and that product development team developed product and then went to various parts of the world to find a product to sell with their brand on it. So they were not a manufacturer until they acquired Meade in 2021. Okay.
Right
Got anything else, Chris?
Nope. I was going to say that's all that we have right now.
Okay. Thanks for the questions, and feel free to ask away if you have some more. Okay, so in the retail world, the retailers that are out there have changed significantly since I got in the industry. In 2007, when I became the VP of Specialty Sales at Meade Instruments, there were around 2,000 accounts globally for Meade. And I had about 400 accounts in the US and Canada. And they were publicly traded and did about $107 million when I joined them, and the year before I joined them in 2007. They have dramatically changed since then, went through a lot of rough patches, had a CEO change, actually had two CEO changes in the last 10 or 12 years before they went to Chapter 11 and were acquired by Orion. So that company had the bull by its horns at one time, and a few things caused them to get in the position they're currently in. But that again is probably information that doesn't need to be shared. I do like the brand. I own a LX200 12-inch. I've had it for about 10 years. It is an exceptional telescope, and they still do make really, really good telescopes. But because of their financial ups and downs and the woes and troubles they've had over the many years, it's gonna be a tough road to get back to where they once were. In 2012, right after I was laid off, they had I had 250 active accounts. So you can see I went from about 400 accounts to 250 accounts in just 5 years. And at that time, Meade went from 2,000 accounts globally to about 500 accounts. And that year, 2012, was publicly announced. They did just over 21 million. So it went from 107 million in 2006 to only 21 million in 2012. So that is, part of the reason they are where they are today. In 2013, I went to work for Explorer Scientific, and there were about 70 accounts when I was hired. I grew it to about 100 before that first year was over. And what was really exciting about the Explorer Scientific businesses was they focused on two really primary things: eyepieces, which are incredibly good for the money, and some refractors, and then eventually branched out into some Newtonians and Dobsonians. And they're doing really well right now. They have the same issues everybody has with supply and demand at the moment, but they're doing really, really well right now to continue to grow their business. In 2019, when I came to Celestron, there was I started with 143 active accounts, and that was in the US and Canada. Initially in the US only. And in 2020, I acquired the dealers in Canada as well. So it grew to about 192 accounts. And the interesting part about all of the industry and the manufacturers and the retailers, that the vast majority, it's the 80-20 rule, and the top 20 dealers that I am responsible for in 2020 did 87% of the business that I was responsible for with Celestron the first couple of years, and still do about 80 to 85% of the business at Celestron and for the accounts that I'm responsible for. And in 2020, Celestron had 430 active accounts in the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. They also do business worldwide. They have distributors in Europe, Australia, Asia, so that they have other parts of the world other than just U.S., Mexico, and Canada. And that's a very separate division. The U.S. is involved in some of that, but not very much of that. Okay. The saddest part about this industry is when I joined Meade in 2007, there were probably, I don't know, 3,000 retail locations in the United States where you could walk in and touch a telescope. There were retailers like Ritz Camera and Wolf Camera. Those two combined to have 1,600 locations, and they had telescopes on display in the vast majority of their stores. So that gave the consumer, you guys out there that buy telescopes, gave the consumers an opportunity to walk in and touch and play with a telescope before they bought it. That has dramatically changed. There's an enormous surge in e-commerce. All of you know about Amazon. Almost every retailer in the world now has a website or an app on your phone to do business with them. And that has changed the landscape of the retail location. So technically, I don't know the answer to this, but I think there's less than probably 20 retailers in the United States and Canada that show high-end telescopes. I think the top 20, 25 dealers, I'll show you a slide in a second, but I think the top 25 dealers in the country, only about 12 of them have a showroom now. So it's dramatically changed. Makes it harder for you guys to make decisions about buying product. Of course, there's plenty of details about it on the internet, and you can Google anything you want and get just about an answer for everything you ask. But that has changed the landscape of the telescope retailers, and I think even with once everybody gets back to normal, that's going to have a bigger impact on the environment of the astronomy retailer. But if the momentum keeps going, it may be okay. We have not been able to get out for the last couple of years and go do some shopping like you would normally do, and a lot of that has dried up from the astronomy arena. So you have to rely on the details and information on the website about the product, or hopefully run into somebody that has one that you're interested in out in the field at a star party or something, so you can learn more about it. But that makes it a lot more challenging from a consumer perspective to get what you want initially, because you can't go look at it as easily. I'll show you some of those retail locations now. As you know, in the U.S., Amazon is probably the biggest retailer of astronomy equipment. We certainly, all the manufacturers are certainly doing business with Amazon. Not all of them, but a vast majority of them are doing business with Amazon. You might be familiar with B&H Photo and High Point Scientific and Adorama and Oceanside Photo and Telescope and Woodland Hills, Optics Planet. Those are all big dealers in the United States. All of them have closed their showroom except Woodland Hills. Woodland Hills is actually a camera store, originally a camera store, and is now it's called Woodland Hills Telescope and Camera, to be officially named. But they still have a showroom. And then there's another showroom in Southern California called Orange County Telescopes. B&H used to have telescopes on display, but 2 or 3 years ago, they changed that. They no longer have telescopes on display. They may have 1 or 2, but they don't have what they used to have 5 or 6 years ago. They've really changed that dramatically. Adorama used to have a whole floor in their 5-story building that was dedicated to the astronomy hobby. That goes all the way back to the mid 2000s, maybe 2010, 2012, maybe, but they no longer have a display. And Oceanside Photo and Telescope was at one time probably the biggest showroom in the United States. And that building has been sold two or 3 years ago, and they now are in a office park, and they do take appointments, so you can go in and see telescopes, but they don't have anything on display. At the beginning of COVID, they didn't have anything on display. So I don't know if that's changed, but at this moment, I don't think they do. There are other places that are in this list that will let you come and look and touch. Focus Camera in New York, Mile High Astronomy in Colorado, Cloud Breaks in Seattle, Land, Sea, and Sky in Texas, and Starzona in Arizona. All those guys have showrooms as well. So they're not totally gone, but again, it is making it harder for the consumer to make some choices and decisions if they can't go look at it and touch it. In Canada, there's 3 showrooms that are still doing showing display telescopes: Conscope, Astronomy Plus, and KW Telescope. Ontario and All Star and Telescopes Canada will take appointments, so they're not. They don't have anything set up in display, but if you call and say, hey, I want to come and look at something, they'll get something out and set it up for you if they have it in inventory. So you're not totally limited if you're close to those guys. Same thing in the US, but generally most of them are in business parks and warehouse spaces and primarily do business online. Okay. Chris, got any questions?
Yeah.
Good.
John Schwartz, as an amateur astronomer who has been in the hobby since 1967, I found this a really interesting presentation. Greetings, thanks for your friends at Northwest Suburban Astronomers. I guess it's more like a comment than a question. So.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about advertising and how the advertising has driven sales, and we'll also talk about the astronomy magazines in a minute. But these are ads that were in either Sky and Tel or Astronomy magazine going way back. My favorite one is of Spock showing an old Celestron CPC telescope that is still in production, but looks quite different than that one does. There's an ad from Meade Instruments in the top right-hand corner. That was one of the first ads that they put. That is the first ad they put in Sky and Telescope magazine in 1972. It cost a whopping $115. Another campaign that Celestron did in the 70s was called the Celestron Girls. They used cute, attractive women to show off their telescopes. I don't think that would go over too well nowadays, but it was a great campaign for them. I heard the success of that was very well received. So there's a Celestron 10 up there in the top that was in the March 1966 edition of Sky and Telescope magazine. That is not Tom Johnson, but that I don't think it is. I asked around to some of the guys that I work with if they could tell me for sure, but they weren't 100% sure. So, but that's a nice Schmidt Cassegrain up there on the top with a little Schmidt Cassegrain on top of it. So back then, even then, they were promoting both products at the same time. We'll get into more about the magazines in a few minutes, but I'm sure all of you know about Telview. Telview is probably one of the most respected manufacturers in our industry, and probably if they aren't in the top 10 are very close to being in the top 10. I think they are in the top 10. We don't know about their volume, but they do a really, really good job of promoting refractors and eyepieces, and are world renowned for their quality for sure. So the magazines are important to our hobby, and there's really 2 predominant publications: Astronomy magazine and Sky and Telescope magazine. There's another one that's an internet only. It's called Astronomy Technology Today, which is a really great publication. They are dedicated solely to the product, and I'm a subscriber of theirs, and really like reading the articles they offer. If you haven't seen that, you should look into it. It's a pretty good publication. It's only on the internet, and you download the copies. They don't print and mail you stuff like Sky and Tel and Astronomy does. So Astronomy is the largest monthly circulation astronomy magazine in the world. They were founded in 1973, and as of 2020, combining both print and e-magazine, they do about 85,000 monthly subscriptions, which is still pretty strong. But if you look at 2015, they were doing almost 114 million circulation, and that was before the internet became super popular. It was in the early days of the internet, which started in the late 90s. So going from 114 currently, in 2015 to currently about 85,000 is a pretty big change. But that's the way the world is, and the e-news edition is about 20% of that 85,000. So more people are getting on their computers and reading news and getting their information through the internet anyway. So it's growing as well. I've talked to several guys that work for Astronomy, have worked or work for Astronomy magazine, and they say they're actually feeling a little bit of recovery since COVID has come, and their production, their circulation is up a little bit since 2020. So that's good news. Sky and Tel was founded in 1941. It's the oldest magazine, and it's been around, forever. And their publication circulation is combined print and e-news as well, and they're down quite a bit as well. In 2000, they had 132,000 circulation, and their magazine was thick. I remember when I went to work for Meade. Meade used to buy 18 pages of ads in the Sky and Tel and Astronomy magazines, 18 pages just for their product. So that now you're lucky to see a full page. There's probably only about eight or nine full page ads in the current magazines. It's just expensive, and the circulation is low, so it's very expensive to do. But that's the kind of news about our circulation of the magazines. I don't have any information about Astronomy Technology in terms of their circulation. Again, they only do it online, but that is something that that I couldn't find in terms of I know the owner, the publisher. I met him 15 years ago, probably at Winter Star Party. Really nice guy. Gary's his name. And they put out a really good product. If you want to go look for something a little different than the magazines, even though it is an e-magazine, you should look into it. It's pretty good stuff. It's called Astronomy Technology Today. So let's talk about what the manufacturers pay to be in those magazines. It might surprise you how expensive it is, despite this circulation. So Astronomy magazine offers obviously multiple sizes, and they also offer electronic advertising. But if you wanted to be on the back cover of Astronomy magazine, it would cost you $107,000 per year. And that's as of 2020. I don't remember if it's 2020 or 2021. It's recent. It's not but a year or two old. And if you want on the inside front cover, which is called the second cover, that's $102,000 a year. So when I worked for Explorer Scientific, they had the back cover to Sky and Telescope magazine. And after about 16 or 17 months, they did an analysis and realized they weren't recovering their money. So they gave up that back page. I'm sure it was goodwill, and a lot of people got the information about their branding, and it was very good for them at the time. But they decided not to do the back page after about 18 months of doing it. So it is it's expensive, and it is now only a couple of places where people can see the product other than looking at product pages on the websites of the manufacturer. So it's still a good vehicle, but it's really expensive. I would imagine many of you are shocked to see how expensive that back page is. So that's Astronomy magazine and how they do. They do have marketplace ads in the back. They're like classifieds in a way. They do have smaller companies that do lower volume of product a year. That they do buy those little marketplace pay circulation kind of or ads in the back of the Astronomy magazine, and Sky and Tel has them as well, but they're quite less expensive. $150 basically is about what they cost. The same goes for Sky and Tel. Sky and Tel is a little bit less expensive now than it was, say 4 or 5 years ago, primarily because the circulation is down. And this is from 2020 and 2021. In 2016, it cost $120,000 per year. Now it only costs about $88,000. So the cost of that ad has gone down because their circulation has also been reduced. And they, as I mentioned, they have marketplace ads as well. Now, those 5 little magazines that popped up there after I started this slide are other magazines that do astronomy related advertising. Astronomy Technology Today is what I mentioned earlier. That's an E only, on the internet only. But National Geographic, they do sell advertising to the astronomy industry. Pop Science does. All About Space, Discovery. There's Discover Magazine. There's 2 or 3 other publications that will occasionally run a ad or 2 based around the astronomy industry, but you don't see it consistently. So the biggest area right now for the retailers is online, and they're called keyword searches. If you've ever searched for a particular telescope, usually the first 2 or 3 ads that pop up are paid for by a retailer or a manufacturer, and they actually are noted with ad, the word ad, and you can see it right here on the screen, ad, on these top 2 ads. But that is part of Google search. So if you just type in telescope, getting a response is going to be broad, and it's also going to include a handful of ads up there at the top of the search, and that also returns pricing on a certain group of product that is called click-throughs. So if you click on one of those ads or one of the products that are shown off to the right-hand side of that search, the retailer or the manufacturer, depending on who's running the ad, has to pay between $2 and $5 per click. So if someone clicks on that Skywatcher Classic 10-inch, that's $610 from OPT, then OPT pays between $2 and $5 every time that's clicked. And they can buy and trade those ads almost daily, and they use Google Analytics to tell them how productive those ads are. And some guys spend as much as $40,000 a month on those ads. So the interesting part about the internet and the way, we drive business through the internet is through ads and Google search words. So if you type in Celestron, or you type in Meade, or you type in Explore Scientific, generally there's going to be an ad that pops up because we want to be at the top of the list. And to get to the top of the list, generally you have to pay for an ad. So hopefully that helps you understand a little bit about how search works and how those always seem to pop up at the top of your searches. That is something that's going to occur pretty frequently. The interesting part about Sky and Tel, their website and traffic is off to the left here. And I just want to give you a little kind of an idea of what's happening there. So in Sky and Tel, when you go to their website, they're saying about 538,000 individual users are going to their website to type in skyandtel.org and get to their landing page, which is their homepage. And they're getting about 1 million monthly page views. And you can see the increase is up since their launch of this analytics to give them information about who's coming to their website, who's looking at products they're advertising, those types of things, is increasing dramatically. And that is because of the buying habits that we all have. And they also publish demographics. They publish by age and by gender. And that, excuse me, guys, that's also very important for the manufacturers and for the retailers to see who is buying going to the websites demographic wise, so that the manufacturers and retailers can hone in their advertising budgets to make sure they're marketing to the people that are spending money in the hobby. I am almost out of time, but if you have a few questions, please feel free to fire them at me.
Okay, Greg, I do have some, and I'm
Good.
gonna start with a more recent one since you just finished that topic.
Okay.
So what's the economics? I'm sorry, this is posted by Bill Purdue. What's the economics of the new products press release articles, such as Sky and Telescope's new product showcase?
Yeah, I don't think they pay for those. I don't think the manufacturers pay for those. What the editors of the magazine want to do is to obviously promote new products to increase visibility in the hobby and get more people involved in the hobby. And generally what happens when you're a manufacturer and you have a new product and you want it reviewed, you contact the magazines, and the magazines will generally accept your new product and give it to one of their writers. And their writers do it, and the magazine pays the writer. The manufacturer does not pay for that. I am 99.9% sure that does not occur through the magazines. It's very possibly different in other vehicles like reviews and stuff like that. That's a little different kind of a review than the magazines do, but it's possible that people pay for reviews on websites and other traffic areas. But I'm 99.9% sure the manufacturers do it as part of a service to the magazines do it as part of a service through the manufacturers. And I do believe they just send a product. The manufacturer sends the product to the magazine, and the magazine gets a reporter, a writer to review it, use it, review it, and then it's sent back to the manufacturer generally. So sometimes they keep it a few months, sometimes they keep it 6 months, sometimes they send it to a variety of different writers to get different, takes on what the product is like. But that's pretty much how it goes with the magazines. Okay.
Okay, and we'll kind of stay in that same vein. Jim Irwin asked the question, usually the price of the same telescope doesn't vary between retailers. Why is that?
Yeah, there's a program that was about, I don't know, the early 80s, Colgate. You're going to find this kind of interesting, but this is legalese. So Colgate would put a product on the shelf in retailers and require them to not market it at below a particular price. And at that time, it was called manufacturer's advertised policy. So if a retailer advertised that particular toothpaste, they couldn't advertise it below a certain price. And there was an agreement between the manufacturer and the retailer to hold that price. And that kind of helped the margin. The manufacturer's price, it's called the MAP, manufacturer's advertising policy, has been through court many times. And those, I'm sure it's changed from the time I was involved. I was involved in a situation in the mid 2000, maybe 4 or 5, no, later than that, 7 or 8. And that stood up in court. Minimum advertised price stands up in court. And there's 2 phases to it. When you advertise it, you're not allowed to advertise it below a particular price. And there can be repercussions from, a slap on the wrist to losing your dealership, depending on what the agreement between the manufacturer and the consumer is. And that depends on the agreement. But if you advertise below that price, there are consequences generally. And there are sections of the product from different manufacturers. If you look at entry-level telescopes as an example, most manufacturers don't put a minimum advertised price policy on that particular category because it's generally seasonal and it's generally based on the market trends at that particular time. And they don't do a minimum advertised price on the lower end product. When you get to the higher end product, It would be a race to the bottom from the retailer's perspective to try to get every customer to do business with them. If we didn't have the minimum advertised price policy, then that dealer would eventually go out of business because they wouldn't make money. So that's generally the reason the program is in place. There have been many legal battles over minimum advertised price. And there's a lot of rules the companies have to follow, and there's a lot of rules the retailers have to follow. But it's primarily to protect the retailer's margin so they can make enough money to stay in business. Okay,
great. I have a question, but I'll wait. And I want to address David Martin's question about his first telescope. Was the Criterion RB6? What happened to them? And I think Bill Purdue's tried to help answer, but go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to what happened to them. They weren't even around when I started working for Meade as an independent rep in 2005. They'd long been gone. I do see some of their telescopes at antique displays. If you've ever heard of NEAF, that's the Northeast Astronomical Forum, which is a big trade show for our industry up in New York. It hasn't been held in the last couple of years. I do believe it's going on this year, but it's a showcase for retail manufacturers to go, and the consumers are allowed to come in to that show. There's always a guy that sells antique telescopes there, and he has had a few of those telescopes to display and to sell. But I don't know what happened to that company. I really don't.
Okay, great. And Bill Purdu is posting a link for information about them.
Great.
So my question, kind of going back to the marketing, how are people like YouTube influencers changing that marketing picture?
That's a great question. Some influencers are being paid a little bit of money by the retailers or the manufacturers. The manufacturers are providing product to a handful of those guys to do reviews. Not all of them are, have a relationship with the manufacturers in order to do that, but they are getting paid from Google Ads. And I know several guys that had really good jobs that now are only doing YouTube videos or TikTok or whatever. And those guys are getting paid through ads that are generated from the amount of followers they have. If you just go to any of the manufacturers, the bigger manufacturers, they actually do in some cases show their influencers. We have a page on the Celestron site. I don't know if Meade does any longer. Explore Scientific, I think, does list theirs. They don't have too many, but they do list theirs, I believe, on their website. So you can see who is promoting product based on the manufacturer, but the manufacturer generally doesn't pay them. There are some agreements for a trade of equipment, maybe for payment, but generally they're not paid by the retailers and the manufacturers. They're generally paid from their YouTube influence, from the followers they have, and ads that are inserted into their reviews. So that's generally how they get paid.
Okay. We kind of have a question comment here. We find a lot of lower end scopes, by Jim Merwin. We find a lot of the lower end scopes, like what we call Walmart specials. They seem to almost do more harm than good when bringing people into the hobby. Do the manufacturers realize the problems these can cause?
Yeah, that's a really excellent question, and it's one that is really challenging for the manufacturers. We think, and you would be blown away by the volume of those low end telescopes that are sold, 4 or 5 months out of the year. Blown away. I mean, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of them, are sold every year in the United States and Canada. The hope is that, a small percentage of those people will get excited about the hobby and they'll go to something better. That's our intention from the manufacturer's perspective. That is the reason those products are still available in the marketplace. It also helps our manufacturing facility. When you build tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of those low-end telescopes, it helps your factories, get volume. It helps your factories make money, and it is important to the industry. It is also true that a lot of people end up using them as what I call doorstops. They end up putting them in their kids' room or in their living room as a little piece of furniture, and they never use them. And that's very unfortunate. I'm going to do a 2-minute ad here for Celestron. We came out with a product in 2020 called the StarSense Explorer. And the StarSense Explorer uses smartphone technology. It has a little cradle on the telescope that you put your smartphone in with an app that we developed with Starry Night. And that app is aligned with the telescope. And then once the alignment is made similar to you do your finder scope, you do that with your phone and the telescope tube on an object. Once it's aligned, then you hit a yellow star, an orange star on the app, and it will pop up tonight's best objects. And based on your time, date, all that stuff that's in the phone already, and the magnetometer and the accelerometer built into the phone, and plate solving technology, we take a picture of the sky with your smartphone of a reflection of the sky in the mirror that's in the base of the holder that holds the phone. And we plate solve, and we determine where the telescope is pointed. And that once you pick an object, it will tell you where that object is. If any of you remember the Sky Scout and the My Sky, which were little devices that you hold up, one looked like a drill motor, one looked like I don't even know how to define it. But it would allow you to look at the night sky and identify objects through that device. It's similar technology to that, even much more refined, and it will let a user, even in city lights, it will let a user see 15 or 20 objects in the night sky every night. It's incredible technology. If you want to see it, there's a page on Celestron's site. It's called StarSense Explorer. And once you pick on any of the products, the video is down. A video that shows how it works is down below that. If I had 5 minutes, I'd show it to you, but I probably don't. So I won't bust that out. But it's a really, really great product. And we sold tens of thousands of those in the first year it was introduced in 2020. And we can't keep them in stock. They're being sold year round, which is a really big plus instead of just in the seasons. But it is a great, great, great telescope for a beginner. We make 4 models, 2 refractors and 2 Newtonians, and they all 4 work exactly the same way with the smartphone. It's a really, really great technology, and that's hopefully going to help encourage the guys that are into the hobby to tell people about this telescope so that they get something they can use and will help them find objects. And they won't just have the moon and Jupiter and Saturn to look at. So they'll be able to look at other things. I hope that answers the question. I hated to make that a commercial, but that's the answer to that question, really.
Okay, and I think you kind of approached this next question posed by our quiz. What high-end features do you see moving down to the mid and low-tier vendors?
That technology is certainly going to expand. The StarSense Explorer technology is certainly going to expand into other telescopes down the road. There's conversations about, with the product development team at Celestron as to which direction it needs to go. And there's some stuff that'll probably show up by the beginning of next year that will help expand that market, expand the types of telescopes that use that technology. But I think that technology is already available in go-to telescopes. It's called the StarSense. Meade had a technology that used a little guide scope on a telescope that did a similar thing. It did plate solving. The StarSense does the same thing. That's already been available on go-to telescopes. So it makes the alignment procedure pretty much foolproof. As long as you can see a pretty good section of the sky, the telescope moves around and take pictures of the sky, and then determines where it is and where the stars are and constellations are. And then you just tell the handbox by selecting a Messier object or a, NGC object or whatever. And then the telescope will go to that because of the alignment technology that's now being used. And that star sense is now available on, it will work on just about every go-to telescope we have. It's a device that connects into an auxiliary port, and you get a new ham box, and then the technology then will make that telescope auto align essentially. So that's coming. I think that's coming towards Dobbs and other, telescopes other than Schmidt-Cassegrains and refractors and Newtonians. So I think that technology is going to come to Dobbs and stuff like that eventually, at least through our brand. But that's pretty much all I know about at the moment with, with that kind of future opportunity.
Okay, great. Greg, we have several comments of very fascinating talk, and I concur. So Jim, if you're available and ready, I think we are ready to move on. And again, thank you very much, Greg.
Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate your time and the invitation. I really am glad to be able to talk to everybody. It's too bad I can't see you face to face, but hopefully someday I can do that.
Thank you.